universities. Question is this just a burden to be endured as long as it must by the staff of our universities, and an unrepairable cost inflicted on generations of students deprived of much of what they could legitimately expect from our institutions? Or has it made us discover and experiment with ways of teaching and organizing university life that may make most pandemic higher education more efficient and more fair? In particular, does a more digital university hold the promise of reducing social inequalities, or is it bound to make them worse? These are the questions we asked to our 5 speakers who will be introducing the debate. So, and I briefly introduce them in succession, so I won't do that before each of the talk. First, we shall listen to Piet de Smet. Piet de Smet is a professor, is a Romanist by training and professor at the linguistic department of the KU Leuven. He's a vice rector of the KU Leuven, of the KULAC, that is a KU Leuven campus Kortrijk, but he's also, and that is what brings him here, he's also a vice rector for computed assisted, for educational technology, so the technology in aid of education, which is one of the main axes of the strategic plan of the KU Leuven. Next, we shall have Yves Deville and Françoise Doc, both from the UC Louvain. Yves Deville is an engineer, is professor at the École Polytechnique de Louvain, but he's also advisor to the rector of the UC Louvain on the digital university. Françoise Doc is studied the education. She's coming from that side, directly relevant, obviously, to our topic. And she is chef de projet for the MOOCs. She's been for several years now coordinating the MOOC dimension of the digital activities of UC Louvain. These will be 2 interventions from the academic side, and then we'll have 2 reactions by students. We'll have Dylan Cook, who studied law at the University of Ghent, is currently studying educational sciences at the University of Antwerp, but he is a vice chair of the VWS, the Vlaamse Vereniging van Studenten, so the Flemish student organizations, and it's in that capacity that he will be speaking. And we'll also have Shems Mabrouk, who is présidente de la Fédération des étudiants francophones, de FEF, and was or is a student at the Université Libre de Bruxelles. So we now turn to Piet de Smet from the KU Leuven, who will have a presentation to show us. Each of the 2 presentations are allocated 10 minutes, and each of the 2 reactions 5 minutes, and then there will be time for plenty of debate. So if you have questions, questions will be selected by Bert Sekers, who from the Jonge Vlaamse Academie and the University of Ghent, who is coordinating the event with me. He will select then some of the questions asked in the chat, be it elliptically, and you'll be able to ask them verbally. Piet, it's your turn.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Mr. President. I hope you all see my presentation. Is that okay? All right, great. So it's my pleasure to give you a short introduction on the topic of today. And I called it the digital, but between brackets, university in a post-pandemic or pandemic world, challenges and opportunities. And to do so, I have in mind to, well, let's just see how we can move ahead. I click on this one, voila. So the idea is that I first give a kind of terminological clarification, because in the title there are three concepts that are evolving and interacting: digital, university, and pandemic. Also, there are some, in my humble opinion, some misconceptions on what we understand by a digital university. And finally, there are challenges and opportunities. There again, three challenges, three opportunities for three profiles. So you see, I like today a kind of ternary structure, not to say a trinity. Okay, so let's first clarify the concepts. We have three evolving concepts that interact. We have digital first. You see a kind of elements that are linked to a digital university. Pandemic, is it yellow, orange, red, black, or another color? And we have university. Is that the mainstream university, the extended university, a flexible university, to be discussed? Well, if we look more closely at the first concept, the digitization, I see at least three global types of digitization: the hybrid university, the digital first or digital only university, and the multimodal university. Let's first take the hybrid university. This is the dominant mode we were using in pre-pandemic times, where we say, okay, synchronous professor and student in the same room at the same time is on campus. Online is dominantly asynchronous, and there the focus is on learning management systems, learning experience platforms, on online assessment, but that online assessment happens on campus, not offline, and on technology-enhanced learning spaces, but learning spaces that focus on campus teaching, not on online teaching. And then we have the pandemic. And in the pandemic, we moved to digital first, and finally, in codes red and black, to digital only. At that moment, we changed, let's say, the focus, and other types of technology popped up. So, for instance, video, recordings, clips, video lessons, live streaming, and web lectures, synchronous, asynchronous, and virtual classrooms also, like this one, kind of virtual technology to realize, well, an alternative to contact teaching. In the ideal world, I hope that in post-pandemic times, where we are evolving to, I hope you're evolving toward that situation, I hope we can come to a kind of multimodal university, an omni-channel university, where we combine online and on campus in an integrated way. So that's the first takeaway for me. It's all about integration at the digital level. And if we look at the pandemic, well, of course, we have pre-pandemic, pandemic, and post-pandemic. For me, the pre-pandemic is mainly hybrid, exception MOOCs, we'll discuss that still, and Open University. In the pandemic, it was digital first and progressively digital only. In the post-pandemic, I hope that we evolve towards an omni-channel approach with a flexible technology adapted to the specific educational context where we want to use technology. And so my second takeaway is it's all about context. Third concept is three types of universities. So the first university is a mainstream university, focusing on the 18-25 years old bachelor, master, regular courses. And at a technological level, we tackle that audience mainly through a mainly hybrid approach. On the other hand, we have what in the United States they call the extended university or the university extensions. Extensions focusing on lifelong learning, on other types of audiences, and also in evenings, Saturdays. And there I see that digital first appears in very specific contexts. So this is more innovative in non-pandemic times. And I hope that finally we come towards a kind of flexible university, which is open, international, addressing all those audiences in a flexible way. So my third takeaway is it's all about flexibility. If you have those three concepts, we also have some misconceptions or misconceptions about the digital university. The first one is the Peter Hinson idea: digital is the new normal, so all education should be digital. Digital is only but a means, a powerful means, but not an end in itself. So let's not say that a digital university is the future. That's why I put digital between brackets. We're going to integrate at university level, not only digitize. Second misconception, it's the end of the lecture hall. Well, I don't think it's the end of the lecture hall, and the art of lecturing remains important. However, two nuances. First of all, students are working and professors in an information-rich environment where they get from digital and non-digital sources, they get complementary information to what the professor is telling. And you're challenging us on the way we tackle information. On the other hand, collaboration is also very important in the contact learning, but also in the online learning. So it's not because it's online that collaboration is excluded. That's another misconception. And the final misconception to me is the computer takes it over. And certainly in AI times, the professor lost control. I don't think so. I think that the role of the professor is key at the level of content, at the level of pedagogy, at the level of technology. And then what are the challenges? There again, you won't believe it, but I have 3 challenges and 3 opportunities for 3 profiles. Unbelievable. Well, first of all, the challenges. The challenges for 3 types of profiles: the student, the staff, and university. For the student, I see at least 3 challenges. Technology should be affordable, and depending on the socioeconomic status of the student, we should intervene as a university. What we do in the pandemic situation, but also in the post-pandemic situation, we should tackle those issues. Second issue is the availability. Availability not only in our auditoria, but also at home. And finally, it should be community-driven and not individual, because otherwise we have mental health issues, we have a lack of collaboration, and so on and so forth. For the staff, it should remain feasible, because digitization is time-consuming. And it's not because you digitize that you have a kind of economy of scale at your staff level. Not at all. It should be trustworthy at the level of GDPR, at the level of robustness and reliability. And finally, it should be adaptable. Adaptable technology to the specific needs. An engineer has other needs in technology than a law scholar, for instance. And finally, at university level, 3 challenges again. The solutions we use should be robust and secure. I think about cybersecurity issues. Lots of universities have had to tackle issues at that point in the pandemic period. It should be scalable, institution-widely usable. If you have 60,000 students, I shouldn't tell you that the solutions you introduce should be stable, should be scalable. And finally, very important point, integration. You should be able to integrate all those technological solutions in one open, flexible architecture. That are the challenges. But as you see, I'm also convinced that there are plenty of opportunities. Otherwise, we wouldn't do that, and we wouldn't be convinced of the importance of technology in education. And then I have my final takeaways, and that's my last slide. Let's go for a multimodal and omni-channel approach. So it's all about integration of digital and non-digital. Let's go for a context-dependent and specific approach. So it's not one size fits all, but for engineers, it's lot size one. I mean, we adapt our technology to the specific pedagogical content. And finally, we don't go only for the mainstream university, but technology allows us to tackle other audiences and to evolve towards a more flexible, a more open, a more accessible university. And so my conclusion is it's all about integration, context, and flexibility. And if we take care of those, we try to realize those opportunities, we still have to tackle the challenges. And at that moment, we have a real digital university in post-pandemic times.
Okay, thank you very much, Piet, for this brief, succinct, compact introduction to the topic. There is clearly something that is related to you being a Romanist, which is the nice threefold structure of the French dissertation. Thank you. So we move on to Yves and Françoise from UC Louvain.
Okay, so Françoise.
So I open the floor. Okay. Well, Thank you. The first idea we found important to share with you is to distinguish between what we've been experiencing for several months now and what is generally called as online and distance learning. So what we've been experiencing is now often called emergency remote teaching. And you can see in the slide the differences between these unique particular contexts and online and distance learning. For example, you see online and distance learning has been offered and designed and organized for at least 20 years. And before that, it was not online, it was distance learning. So there is a sound pedagogy in this approach. It's an approach carefully planned with a specific instructional design to foster learning, and the tools are really carefully chosen in order to be relevant for the learning activities. All that takes time. Designing an online course takes a lot of time and in-depth pedagogical thinking and design. And so what we are living now, it's not that. It has been a sudden move in something unfamiliar for most of the professors and the students. So we cannot mix one with the other, and it's really important to use the word carefully, not to be confused about what we are living now. It's Pete actually was in the same direction, to carefully distinguish between things and elements. And Eve, if you please go ahead. So the main idea is, with this distinction, is to invite us to acknowledge the unique nature of this particular situation, emergency remote teaching, more than learning, actually. And so be really careful when analyzing, maybe drawing conclusion. What we are living now is not online and distance learning. It's really unique. So that was the idea I really wanted to share with you. And now, Yves, to you.
Okay, thank you, Françoise. So maybe I would like to directly start with some key messages we would like to share with you. So no, we don't want to become a virtual university. Okay, and so face-to-face, as Peter described, is very essential in the university experience of our students. And the objective is not to have only online courses. Those courses should only be just a small part of the curriculum of the students. Yes, online courses may be important in some specific contexts, such as lifelong learning, flipped classroom for international students, and so on. But we don't want to become a virtual university. And so the second message is that digital tool can improve the quality of our teaching mission. Yes, during these last months, all the teachers, they were very inventive with using new technologies, and so we really had some pockets of innovations. So if we want to build on these experiences, we would need to select the best practices and the best uses of technologies for the post-COVID-19 era. Then the next message is maybe a very important one. So we understand, and we had discussion with students last week, that the situation is very, very difficult for them. And we understand that, but we should also understand that online courses is just one of the factors that created those difficulties to students. And the other factors are, of course, that students have all their courses online. So no on-campus social interaction, which is very difficult for them. And it was also in an emergency situation, so remote emergency learning, as Françoise described us. And also, we are also in a situation with confinement. So it means that students don't have the necessary social relations outside their studies, and that's very difficult for them. And also the pandemic is introducing a lot of additional anxiety to students. Okay, so now, is there any effect of COVID-19 confinement on students' performance? So it's just one study. So it's just one study, one university on 450 students. Doesn't mean that it's for all students everywhere. But at least one study show a positive effect of the confinement on the students' performance, and they obtain better scores in different tests compared to students before the pandemic. And the other, what about the performance of students in our universities? So what we can measure is the success rate. And we saw that in June 2020, the success rate increased by on average compared to June previous year. That doesn't mean, of course, that the learning was better. That doesn't mean that situation was good for students. It just means that the success rate was not worse. And this increase of success rate could be explained by many factors. But the idea of this slide is to say that even with this difficult situation, we were able, universities, at least not to penalize students with a worse success rate. Okay, maybe I would like to also to stress the effect of COVID-19 on international mobility. And yes, it's only for in, but also to out students. So we have students who are in mobility, Erasmus mobility. So one of my students is going to Stockholm, and she is just in her apartment, and she can go out. She's not taking any classes, only virtual classes. It's not the best situation for a virtual mobility. And for in students, it's very difficult for them to be on the campus because there is no on-campus learning this year. Okay, now what about social inequalities? Does a digital university reduce social inequalities? Of course, this emergency remote teaching in the context of COVID-19 did not reduce the inequality. Actually, it made them worse. And I think we could all agree on this. But we are convinced that it's possible using a well-designed digital approach to reduce social inequalities. So the social inequalities is not related to digital university. It's related to the specific situation of emergency remote teaching in the context of the pandemic. Okay. So now a final word on remote evaluation, which was a difficult topic in June and in August. Does that reduce the quality and equity on evaluation? Yes. Actually, what we did is emergency remote evaluation. So many teachers just did a simple transposition of on-campus exams into online exams. And I mean, this raises a lot of quality and equity issues, but the question is not on digital, and technologies were able just to improve these issues, but not to solve them. And if we want to really have distance evaluation, then we need to redesign assessment and to redesign to exploit the digital aspects and also distant aspect, and technology is just a minor consequence, a minor problem. Okay, thank you.
Thank you to both Yves and Françoise. So in the list of participants, I still don't see James, unless Bert has been able to locate her. So we'll move on to Dylan. So it's not impossible that we may have, against our plans, we may have only one student reaction, but so Dylan, it's your turn.
Thank you very much. I haven't prepared a presentation because I was willing to react on some of the previous speakers and what I've heard from them, and I've heard a lot of interesting things. For starting, I think the crisis we are living in now has hit higher education quite hard, but definitely has hit students quite hard. Why? We have seen the impact of the crisis on student housing, on student labor. We've seen a lot of more questions about mental health among students. And to a certain extent, also because of the impact of the remote and online learning, for which we were not prepared, nor as students, nor as higher education itself. And I think that was one of the main challenges, definitely in spring, to provide education the best we could at that moment, with the little knowledge there was in many programs about distance and online learning. And definitely before the pandemic, we had seen a lot of resistance in a lot of programs against online learning or resistance or remote learning. And I think, for using the words Professor De Smet used, many programs weren't even in a hybrid state of learning. It was all on-campus learning. It were contact moments for many students without having a lot of tools online to learn more or to extend their knowledge. And those resistance came from both from teachers themselves not being willing to record it, not knowing what would happen with those recordings or with data we collected through online tools, but also coming from students. What will online learning do with students? Will they delay learning? Will they skip lessons and only look to recordings? Questions like that. And still a lot of those concerns haven't been addressed properly at the moment. So still a lot of questions are still unanswered, and we're still in a state of crisis management and providing education at the best as we can. So in mid-March, higher education was forced to digitize not only a part of the education, but every single course had to be reinvented to be provided. And we've seen there are a lot of differences between teachers, between programs. Definitely in the beginning, thinking the lockdown would have ended after Easter. It would only be for 2 weeks. So we've seen a lot of teachers saying, for those 2 weeks, I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to skip my lessons and I'm going to give them after Easter. And well, things happened in a different way. So we've seen a lot of differences in quality between different teachers and in different programs. And nowadays, those differences to a certain extent still exist, but they've become smaller. We've definitely seen that a lot of people have learned from what we've done in spring, and that we have made some steps forward. But there are still some fundamental questions unaddressed. We have made progress to more practical obstacles, mainly using the proper tools, structuring online classes, but questions like what can we expect from a student when we teach from a distance or online? What are the best ways to organize a whole program online? Who should take the lead in organizing online learning? Is that the program? Is that a single teacher? Is that a higher education? Some people are even looking towards the government to take the lead in questions like that. I don't think that's the best way to go, definitely not, but there is still some questions about who will give us the right direction to go without remote and online learning. And as said, we have already learned a lot about online learning, and I think one of the main challenges is to close the gap between the theoretical knowledge we have about online and distance learning and the practical knowledge a lot of teachers and students as well need to be able to follow classes, to be able to attend sometimes hours of classes on the same day and having all the knowledge coming in without forgetting it immediately, because it's way harder to learn from a distance and online than it is in classes. Not only by the lack of social contact, which is another main challenge that has to be addressed, but as well because it's just harder to sit a whole day behind a computer and a screen and watching the same screen. It's way more exhausting than sitting in classes. So as said, the main challenge as a student that I see now for higher education itself is to close the gap between the theoretical knowledge that already exists and the practical knowledge that a lot of people are still lacking to provide the best education we can through online tools. And I'm really convinced that we've learned a lot from Spring, but I'm not convinced yet that we've learned enough to give online education and remote education a structural place in higher education after the crisis. And I think that's necessary to address that question, definitely looking for lifelong learning, for example, reaching to new groups of students that higher education isn't reaching out yet. So that's one of the questions that we think I think we need to address together, higher educations and students together, to what place will we give remote learning and online learning after the crisis? And I would end my intervention with that question, and I hope maybe during the debate some ideas might pop up coming from you. Thank you.